Hi, everyone. My name is Christopher Bruce with the Bruce Law Firm, divorce lawyer in West Palm Beach, Florida. And today I have the just real ultimate pleasure to be joined by Connie Diffenderfer. She is a trauma coach. She's located in the Gainesville, Florida area. And what we're going to talk about is something that I think is just a really important and hard topic for some people. And that's how to develop the mindset to leave a narcissist or a toxic spouse. And, in my experience, my law practice, getting that mindset at the beginning is one of the most important steps of the process. So I'm excited to be joined by Connie to talk about all this. And Connie, maybe before we get into this, just tell the listeners a little bit about who you are and your background and how you came to have your coaching practice.
All right, awesome. Well, first of all, just thank you for having me on here for what you do with your practice and being willing to partner with others. And thank you to everyone that's in the audience that's listening. And I'm just honored to be able to share with you what I know and what I do. So, like Chris said, I'm Connie Diffenderfer. I'm an RN that also went through training as far as to become a coach, a nurse coach. So, I'm board certified nurse coach, but also trauma informed, narcissistic abuse specialist, Brainspotting practitioner, and a board certified mental health coach. And just a little bit about me personally, I grew up through a lot of trauma. I went through foster homes, a lot of things, a lot of abuse, things like that growing up. And then when I was young, I guess about 17, I started dating a narcissist, and I got married at 18 and was with him for 25 years. And basically, over the course of that time, I lost who I was. I became confused. I was just beat down. I was afraid, and I felt stuck. And eventually, after a breaking point where my children, I just couldn't take it anymore. I was faced with having to rebuild my life. And at the time, I had four children, two of them biological, and they were older, and then two that I had adopted that had multiple severe disabilities. And so I knew that I had to mourn, but I also knew that I had to do some things to get my life together and to rebuild for my children and me. And so I went to massage therapy school, I went to nursing school, and went through as far as all my training to become a coach. And all of that just sort of come together and just kept leading me more and more to be able to help women that had gone through similar things. So I do a lot with trauma, but specifically with those that have suffered narcissistic abuse.
Well, Connie, thank you for sharing about your background, and I think you're probably the first, the perfect person to ask this. If you could, maybe just explain how being in a long term, right? I guess even in a short term relationship with a narcissist or just another toxic individual can affect a person.
Yeah, absolutely. And bear with me if you see me looking down, I'm looking at my notes because I want to make sure that I don't forget anything. But, with narcissistic abuse, it's so insidious and it can happen to anyone. And what I found is it often happens to people that are strong, capable, they have these wonderful qualities, and that's what attracts the narcissist to them. And this is often an additional battle that the victim goes through because they're blaming themselves. How could I have gotten myself into this? And so, for those of you listening, if this is you, you didn't do anything wrong, they're
Yeah.
attracted to you because of the good in you. And they will even mirror those qualities to make themselves look good. So, this is how they win you. But to really answer your question, once a narcissist feels like they've won you and they've trapped you through targeting, grooming, love bombing, their mask begins to come off. And this will immediately cause confusion and a cognitive dissonance with the victim as they try to make sense of these two different sides because this person is not who they fell in love with. And as this continues, dissociation can take place, and as the victim still trying to figure it all and hold it together and make it work. And anytime it's addressed with a narcissist, the victim is usually gaslighted using, it's called DARVO. So it's DARVO, and it stands for denial, arguing, reverse victim, and the oppressor. So this just leads to more confusion for the victim. And so between the confusion and then the neglect, the verbal, emotional, sexual, financial, spiritual, and sometimes even physical abuse, the victim just deteriorates in every area of their lives. Their needs are not being met. They feel like no one understands. They're often told that it's their responsibility to fix it, which leads to further victimization and exhaustion. And this just depletes the victim emotionally, physically, spiritually, and sometimes financially. And so the narcissist will then use this to shame and to further blame the victim because they aren't who they used to be. And then during that time, the victim's nervous system is struggling between this fight and flight, which is our sympathetic nervous system, or freeze fawn, our parasympathetic nervous system. And then their body's getting flooded with all this cortisol, which leads to increased inflammation systemically throughout the whole body, headaches, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, autoimmune disorders, and the inability to lose weight, insomnia, brain fog. And so you can see how all of this is just this spiral that goes down and it snowballs and eventually can become life-threatening to the victim. And that's why I say that emotional abuse is actually covert physical abuse, because it is physical abuse. It's just not being seen. And then during that time, the victim's most likely losing their relationships. Due to these complications, they may struggle to maintain any source of independence and unable to think clearly. And it's like poison to the victim's soul.
It's, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head of so many emotions that our clients talk about when they come to us, and it's, you know, I guess it's something people overlook, but I guess the covert physical abuse is that's, I haven't heard that said before, but that's a good one. I think that's exactly how, you know, the symptoms manifest in some people, especially when it's been a long time. Connie, I think maybe your experience both as a nurse, as a coach, and as somebody in one of these relationships previously, probably uniquely qualified to talk about how does a person's life start to get better once they make the decision in their mind that they want to leave a narcissist. And I know it's not all like rainbows and unicorns, but I mean, what changes do you see in people?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a great question because there's so much fear in change, and especially when you're separating from a narcissist. It's been said that the only thing worse than being married to a narcissist is divorcing one. And so, unfortunately, that tends to be the case.
Yeah.
It gets worse before it gets better. But it does get better. If we do the work and we keep following through, it can get better. So since I was a surgical nurse, I basically use the analogy. I use analogies a lot. So I use the analogy of like surgery. When we suffer an injury that requires surgery, it's going to require there to be additional pain. There's going to be discomfort. There's going to be therapy that we're going to have to go through to get back to the state of health that we were in before the injury. And they might always be a scar that's there forever. But in time, with the right tools and support, it will no longer affect you the same way that it did. And so from my experience, each person, they get to a breaking point, and for everyone that's different, and just not being able to take it anymore. And they begin to seek understanding and help. The next step is really acknowledging the truth of the situation. We see this in 12-step programs. We see it spiritually. The victim has to surrender to the fact that this person is at the very least unhealthy, if not truly dangerous. And so one has to be honest with themselves and admit that this person is not who they portrayed themselves to be. And that's often the hardest part, because they have to come to terms with the fact that the person they fell in love with doesn't even really exist. And they have to work through all the stages of grief there. So there's the denial, the anger, bargaining, depression, and eventually acceptance. And part of that accepting is coming to terms that they can't change the other person. There's no amount of love, no begging, no self-improvement, no praying, no fasting, no education that's going to force a narcissist to change. They don't believe that they need to change, and that makes them incapable of actually following through with that. So the one who's been a target of narcissistic abuse has to detach, deprogram, and detox themselves. This is, excuse me, this is physical as well as emotional, due to the fact that hormones are released during the cycles of
Yeah.
narcissistic abuse. And so that actually causes a physical addiction that creates a trauma bond, or also known as Stockholm Syndrome. And the detachment is accomplished by going gray rock until you can go no contact. It's very difficult, generally requires the help of someone that understands and is willing to help walk a victim through that. And it's extremely difficult. Some actually say that the addiction with narcissistic abuse with that trauma bond is stronger than the addiction of heroin.
Wow, that's that's just really, I haven't heard it put that way, but I believe what you're saying, and seeing how hard it can be, even when somebody knows that they need to stop. I guess in many ways, just like a heroin addict, I think there's many of them that know that they need to stop, and it's hard to, and it's fascinating to hear you describe it that way. And it's moving on though to the progress through one of these situations. As somebody who's trying to leave one of these relationships, I know it has to just appear overwhelming to them. I mean, we hear that from our clients here in the firm all the time. But from my perspective, one of the things that seems to have the most impact on somebody is trying to get the right mindset to leave the relationship and distance themselves. And I'm just curious about your perspective. How do people go about developing that mindset? What's the best thing or the first thing they can do to try to have that perspective shift in their mind to make this very hard life transition?
Yeah, well, I mean, for me as a believer, first thing is prayer. So that's something that's always my first go-to. But from a holistic standpoint, I would say mourn. You have to mourn. This is a death. This relationship, something very important to you that you've put your hope in and your dreams in, and everything that you want for your children has died. And so it's a loss unlike any other. When my ex and I separated, I didn't eat for 3 weeks. Now, I do not recommend that. Looking back, during that time, I can see how I was mourning. I was really grieving with all that I was, and I just allowed myself and my children to do that. And I knew that it wasn't permanent. I knew that I wasn't going into a depression. I knew that I had to feel it. I had to feel it to be able to process it. And that's often we find ourselves that when we're in those situations, if we give ourselves the space to grieve, then we actually will heal sooner and more fully. And so that's the first things. And self-care is huge. You have to take care of yourself. You have to gray rock, no contact. So multiple things there. But yeah, I would definitely say grieving. With me, like I said, the 3 weeks I went, I didn't eat, I cried, I just grieved, I kind of just shut out the rest of the world. I had to give myself and my children that space. And then after 3, and it's different for everybody as far as amount of time, but for me, after that 3 weeks, I kind of looked at my children. I thought we had to do something here. So I just say I put my big girl pants on, I put my makeup on, I fixed my hair, I got me some support, I sold our home, I bought another one, and I put myself in school, and I started rebuilding a life for myself and my children.
I guess it's as you were going through that process, and I guess now as you're helping people through the process of leaving a narcissist, which it's really, I think it's just admirable that you're doing that, especially if you're going through it yourself. Just from your perspective, how important is it for people to develop a vision of what they want their life to be like when they are beyond the situation and relationship that they're in?
I think it's absolutely essential because you can't create something that you can't see. And so I would write it in a journal, create a vision board on Canva. That can be therapeutic in itself. Write out short-term and long-term goals. Get outside and let your body feel it, to see it, to smell it, to hear. Think about this life that you want to create, that you now can create, that you maybe thought that you couldn't create, that you would never have that chance to do it. And for me, create affirmations, go through all these, type it up in your phone, and use this as a daily task to speak over yourself and over your children, if that's applicable for you. But you have to believe it. And sometimes we even have to coach ourselves to help us believe it. But that's why we have to have hope. Hope is critical in this, because if we don't have hope that it can get better, that keeps us stuck.
Sounds like great advice to me. And, when we're counseling our clients as they're going through the divorce process, we have a client program, so to speak, and part of it is vision building, as we call it. And when we do that, and my colleagues do that with our clients, we tell people, we try to make it simple. We say, hey, like, just at least think of some things that you should start doing, things that you should stop doing. Maybe there's some great things that you should keep doing, and really think about that as you're deciding on what you want your life to be like. And I'm just curious, from your perspective as trauma coach, and with how you help your clients, what are some of the things you think would be really good for the person listening to this, who's thinking about moving on from one of these relationships, for them to think about as they try to start envisioning what they want their life to be like down the road?
Okay, yeah, excellent. So, and I've got 8 things here that I wanted to share with everybody. But basically, this is kind of part of the detox portion that I mentioned earlier. So, first, we have to detox from things and from people in our lives that inhibit our healing. These could be things that trigger us, but they could also be things that are just stopping us from moving forward. Sometimes we have to evaluate relationships and let them go. And when we've been in a narcissistic relationship, sometimes there are people in our lives that have actually contributed and kind of fed this situation. And so we have to evaluate that. So we have to ask ourselves, do they trigger you? Are they keeping you down? Do they consume time that you need elsewhere? Because you have to minimize during that time. Your nervous system has been so overloaded, and it needs time to heal and time to restore. And you have to be able to have the energy to do that. And when you do, it can be extremely freeing physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Like I said, for me, when it happened, I threw myself into nursing school. And while I had 4 children at home, and I was homeschooling the 2 youngest that had multiple severe disabilities. So as you can imagine, I cut out all relationships that weren't beneficial to that vision. There was
And
no
if there's
will.
anybody that says life is hard, I mean, if you can go back to nursing school at that time with 4 kids and 2 special needs children while going through that type of life transition, I mean, I think anything is just about possible for anyone. I sorry to interrupt, but I just had to say
No,
something.
no, you're good. Thank you. But that's what I had to do. I had to become so focused. And it goes back to your question that you asked before. We do
Mhm.
have to have that vision. And to be able to have that vision, we have to remove anything that's getting in the way of it so that we can focus on that. So absolutely. And that's what I did. There was no TV for me during that time. And so it was very focused. Number 2, basically, I've always told my children that your calling lies where your gifts, your passions, and your opportunities all come together. I tell them, if you have a passion for something, you have an opportunity for it, but you don't have a gift for it. You might be able to learn it, but you have to accept it might not happen. And so, with my clients, I would take your vision board that we've talked about. Take this journal where you're processing and you're creating what it is that you want for your future, your daily affirmation list. Take all this in hand, pray about where your calling is, and then start creating small action steps that will work you towards that. For me, I knew I had to get a home. I knew I had to get in school. And I just started walking that direction because it's so overwhelming when you're coming out of that. And like I said, your nervous system is just struggling. But if you can just get some steps, that's going to move towards that. And it helps because it's flexible and you can change those steps and you can change that vision board because you're no longer in that narcissistic relationship where you feel so controlled. For number 3, support and faith. You have to do this. We all do. We were created to need each other. We were created to have something greater than ourselves to hold on to. And with a narcissist, especially if you've had children together, you have a battle that you're going to have to fight. And so we have to armor up. I do that by having my God time every morning. And so, whatever that is, for anybody listening, I know that I can't do this alone. I need key people in my life, and I need my faith. And so those are important for everybody. Number 4, education. We have to educate ourselves regarding what we've been through because it's confusing and narcissism doesn't make sense to the rational mind. And so we have to educate ourselves on codependency and on narcissism and on recovery. We want enough to be able to understand it, but not so much that it consumes us, because that can take us into a rabbit hole that actually holds us down and keeps us moving forward too. So I'd pick 1 or 2 resources that really align with you, and then just trust that it's okay to not know it all immediately. It's a process. Number 5, financial independence, an absolute must, because we simply have to have income to eat, to have a home, to have medical care, to take care of our children. And this is going to look different for everyone, and everyone has to have an individualized approach. But the beautiful thing is just this flexibility of the seasons that we're in and the opportunities that are offered. But even if, whether it's part-time from home, whether it's part-time, just whatever we can do to develop that financial independence, because it's going to provide for our needs physically, but it's also going to be healing for us, that we don't feel that we have to depend on someone else to do that for us. And a lot of times what I see with women, especially with women in the church, is that a lot of them have been made to feel like they can't work, like it's wrong for them to work. And that trips a lot of them up, because they feel like, how am I going to take care of my children and work? But in this situation, you absolutely have to. You have to be able to have a way to take care of yourself. Number 6, self-care. You've most likely, or for any clients, anybody listening, any audience, you've most likely neglected this. You've not been able to do self-care in your relationship because you've been taking care of someone else that's very demanding to you. And even if it's just a bath with a candle and some music that's soothing to your soul, just whatever you can do that moves you towards self-care and getting to understand and know yourself again, and to calm and regulate your nervous system. Number 7, have fun. Dance, play games, do a field trip with your children, best friend, laugh at memes. I'm a memeaholic. I tell everybody I don't care anything about TV, but I love funny memes. It's healing to your nervous system to laugh and to be able to have fun, and it's okay to start to enjoy that again. And then my last one is exercise. For people that are in that parasympathetic state, that freeze or fawn, that may just seem like it's just impossible. But even if the victim can just start moving, just even if walk 15 minutes a day, get outside if you can, something to kind of start getting that energy going back and getting those endorphins moving, because it's going to give you strength. It's going to increase your health. It's going to help you to think clearer. And then, so yeah, all of those, that's kind of my 8. So not in any particular order.
That's an amazing list. And I mean, so many of them are very, very important and practical, but I kind of like having fun, in there too. And then sometimes, people forget about that. And it kind of leads me to one of the other questions I wanted to ask you. I mean, with leaving a hard relationship, being married to a narcissist, you don't even have to be married. It could just be any relationship. It can sometimes be hard for people to get excited about what lies ahead in their life, to have fun, or feel like having fun's even possible. And do you have any particular advice for how people can start getting excited about the life that lies ahead for them?
Yeah, well, I mean, everyone has to find inspiration and to find your why. One of the things that may help with you just start seeing that's possible. Look at testimonies of others that have gone through. before. It's possible at any age. I did it in my 40s, so it's not too late. We all have a purpose that still exists there. Basically, I look at it, a narcissist was just a detour that taught us some additional lessons in life that can make us stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. But basically, my inspiration, my why has always been my children. It just always was. It's what made me start eating again. It's what made me get up and get moving. It's what made me buy a house, made me put myself through school. And I knew that I had the choice. I could focus on that 25 years of loss, or I could choose to focus on the possibilities and opportunities that I had now that I didn't ever know that I would have. I'm a firm believer in taking what was intended for evil and using it for good. And I was determined that my children were going to witness the power of that in the midst of it. And so I tell my clients, this is where it takes that warrior in you, that sass, that spunk, the part that maybe the narcissist didn't like, and take that pain and that anger and use it in an energy to launch you beyond what they thought that you could, and to refuse to accept defeat and a victim mentality. And so I've used the word victim several times in here because we do get victimized in the situation, but we don't have to remain a victim. We can experience post-traumatic growth, and we can become an overcomer.
That's amazing to hear. And I mean, it's we're coming up on getting close to 4 o'clock in the afternoon as we're filming this, and I've already had two pretty long meetings today with some people in harder stages of their life. I wish I could have dragged you in and had you say some of this stuff to them. And you got a great way of, I think, showing where the positive lies in all this. So thank you for everything you're sharing. Connie, I maybe for people who are listening to this, they've heard of therapists and how you can go get therapy, which I think we probably both agree is important. But how does what you do as a coach help people as they're coming up on or going through the process of living a narcissist or a difficult relationship? What do coaches do for people here? How do you help?
hmm Well, a lot of people that come to me, they've been to a counselor but never been to a coach, and so they don't really understand. So I'm so glad that you're asking that and just putting that knowledge out there for people to understand the difference, because it can be kind of confusing. But, we all know as far as a counselor, they work more on diagnosis, more on issues that's happened previously, in the past. And as a coach, but specifically being a trauma-informed coach, I do work with that somewhat because I'm focusing on a root cause resolution. But my goal is to see where you are now, how that past is affecting you, and then how to move you forward to where you want to be, and to help my clients be able to see that, because I've also suffered that pain, that confusion, that defeat, and that fear, the hopelessness, being made fun of, betrayal, all those things, and my mistakes that I made along the way, because I'd never done it before. There wasn't a book that gave me everything of how to deal with my ex in that situation. And so I learned as I went through it. And I feel like that's what I bring, is that exact thing, understanding where people are, but also knowing how to get through it. And so I'm just here to show that it can be done, and to hold that space, to provide education, resources. And so we create plans, whatever works individually for that particular person, to move them forward.
And then, for the people that are listening to this and identifying with what you're saying, thinking maybe it could be helpful to them, maybe just take a minute or two more and just tell them about your coaching practice and how you and your team help people, and where they can find you.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and I'm a faith-based coach. So, most of my clients are Christians. Not all of them are. And I coach anyone that needs it. My practice is over Zoom. Most of them is over Zoom. I do a few in my home, but generally it's over Zoom, and I can coach anyone anywhere in the world. I create a safe, but still a powerful place for my clients to break free, to heal, to overcome. So I use things like prayer and scripture if the client is comfortable with that, but then also deep coaching to get to that root cause resolution. So, like those type of things that we would see in counseling, but then also exercises to calm and to nurture the nervous system. I use worksheets. I have an online program that I have, mindfulness, meditation. I do flash EMDR, brain spotting, internal family systems. So a lot of body work in with that because trauma does store in our body. And that's another thing, going back to your other question, that makes coaching different because when we continue to talk about the negative all the time, it keeps us sort of on this merry-go-round and can get us stuck. And so with coaching, we're trying to pull you out of that. So,
That
and
makes a lot of sense.
then,
Go ahead.
no, you're good.
I was going to say, well, that makes a lot of sense. And, for the people, we're going to have all your information in the show notes, so to speak, but people will be hearing this in a lot of different mediums. So what's the best way for people to get in touch with you? Where do they find you? Maybe speak on that before we wrap this up.
Okay. All right. Well, overcomersandhim.com is my website, and there's links to click on for anything. I've got free quizzes on there where you can schedule with me. And it actually will link you to a program that's called Practice Better. And that's the platform that I use for documentation and for my online programs and all of that. So that's how it'll come up. So overcomersandhim.com. You can always find me there. My email is just Connie@overcomersandhim.com. Same thing. And then my phone number, the best way to reach me as far as phone would be 352-325-1230. And I'm on Facebook as Connie Diffenderfer RN. And then on Instagram as Overcomers in Him.
Well, Connie, it's been an absolute pleasure. This is Christopher Bruce, a divorce lawyer in South Florida, and I've been here with Connie Diffenderfer. And thank you for all the value you shared. It's really inspiring to both hear your story, but hear some really great practical tips that I think can really empower people to make their life a lot better when they're in a hard place. So thank you for your time with us.
Oh, thank you so much, Chris. And like I said earlier, for what you do and just for collaborating with others that have different specialties. So thank you.